All right, guys, coming up on the end of the year, and I've had a couple questions from you guys on taxes, and some of you have your own investors, and you're dealing with them. Some of you have deals that have your own investors and PEPP people, and then there are other people that have just PEPP people. So this will be valuable for all of you guys. So one of the reasons that I recommend that you set up an LLC instead of a corporation is that when you have a corporation, the entity is going to get taxed. So you've got to pay the entity's taxes, and then your investors, once they get their returns, they've got to pay as well. The benefit on an LLC is that basically it's a pass-through entity. So whoever gets that money is going to pay taxes. So you get rid of that kind of double taxation. But the positive is that you are quite literally limiting your liability. So the reason that people want corporations and S corps is that they don't want the liability that comes with running a business, and something happens and people are coming back to you and trying to get money from you, or whatever the case may be. A more bigger deal on offline businesses in a lot of cases than online businesses, just because in the space we're in, we just don't see a lot of real craziness. But you still want that liability, and then just separation and that kind of thing once you get into multiple entities and all that. So some neat things that you're able to do there. But we don't want that downside that comes on the tax side with that corporation. So the LLC allows you to not have to deal with that. Now, that's the most basic thing. That's kind of that basic level. As you get into what that means when you're running the business, then there's some interesting things that you are able to do. Now, all of this comes with a disclaimer that I'm not an attorney or a tax accountant, but I just speak from my perspective as an entrepreneur and some of the things that I do. All this stuff as well is you're just able to decide. I'm going to give you the options, but there's number one, not necessarily a right or wrong. I have people, as we've talked about before, when it comes to their taxes, they want to kind of depreciate their assets over 10 years. I have, other people, I don't feel comfortable doing it, but they're depreciating over a year. And so in some of these things, they're just gray areas because this is such a new thing. But there are other things that aren't necessarily gray. So like we talked about, if you keep that, one of the things you want to do with an LLC is whoever your investors are, you want to distribute as much of that cash to those investors as possible. And there are a couple of reasons here is, if you've got an entity and you've got a certain amount of profit and it's in that entity and you're going to pay taxes on that instead of giving the money to the investors, then that costs money. Like you're having to send money to the government. The interesting thing that you're able to do, and one of the things that I personally, it's just a preference, is I want to, let's say if we're in a deal like we've got with Elite, when you've taken profits, you've spent money on inventory, and you've got a big amount in inventory. And let's say, when you're going through and you're like, all right, we've got all this money that we've really spent, but it turns out that it is it's an asset, and so you've got some tax ramifications because of that. What personally I would do is, even if I had to borrow the money to pay the investors, that's a better option, because even if you, in some cases, like you can borrow the money from the investors and at a later point, but even if it's at the beginning, paying the investors interest is a lot better than giving the money to the government. And that just is just a personal thing. Like I said, you could pay the money to the government, and a lot of times it's going to be more expensive. So I prefer to borrow the money, pay the investors, and then if I do need money, it's like, hey, because we've given you this, we actually need to borrow. We can borrow from the investor. It's one of the reasons that I'm really excited about things like upfund.io. Is it's not just, I think, some of the things that we get really excited about is all the strategies for buying a business. But once you're running a business, a lot of these same things should be used to think creatively, and kind of in the same way that I want you guys to figure out the right thing for the situation. So if you're running a business, all I want to do is give you, hey, here are all the ideas. Here are all the things that you're able to do. Here's, just endless kind of opportunity for you to take advantage of whatever tool makes the most sense. But you're in that business every day, and you're the person at the end of the day is also responsible for how well it does. And so it's not for me to say, oh, you have to do this. It's just for you to kind of get some ideas and then decide for yourself, is this something that I want to take advantage of, or is it not the right match for my business? Every business is different. Your financial situation is different. Your investor's financial situation is different. What you've got planned and seasonally, how a business does is different. All of these things come into effect and can change how a deal works. And so, but that's something for you guys to keep in mind. It's not just using these financing opportunities once you are trying to buy the business, but after that, as the owner, trying to figure out, okay, what makes the most sense. But that's a personal bent where I want to get as much money to the investors as possible, even if in some cases, I've gotten the money to buy inventory or to invest in the business or put money into the business. I may have taken some of that from the profits, but I want to figure out how to replace that with the outside financing. And it's one of the things that we get into a little bit later in the program, but something that is, since we're in some deals that you guys have brought up. And so I wanted to give that little tidbit as just one of my personal preferences, and excited to see what strategies and ideas that you guys come up with kind of based on the businesses that you are running. Thanks so much for checking out the video.